Let's see. I think we are live. So welcome everyone to another installation of Practical Creativity, where we unpack how the creative process works so we can actually make it work in our own lives. And I'm Marte Siebenhar, and I'm really excited to be here with one of my favorite thinkers and doers and designers, Siggi Bachmann. Who's an incredible person in many ways. And I love that I'm already seeing the sticky notes behind his back, because that is just very much simpatico. I love it. Siggi, so tell us, just a little bit more about you and what you're up to right now.
Well, thank you. That was a nice introduction. And I'm very honored to be with you all and with you on this live broadcast. So my name is Siggi. I grew up in Iceland, in a very small but beautiful town. I had a great, childhood there, and full of creativity, but a lot of freedom. I work for the World Symphony. I'm a designer. I do a variety of different things for them, mostly now in doing design thinking work and customer-facing work. And helping, in these times, helping the institution kind of work out ideas and co-create together. So that's the short version of it.
Yeah, I love that. And your background has been very international. Obviously, you're from Iceland, and you spent quite a bit of time in Italy when you were in school and then early career. Tell us kind of like what you have brought from, because I don't know, every time we talk, it's like you've taken all these bits from your background and you've put them together and in new and exciting ways. And I think even in the last couple of years, a lot of that work has come together and been very fruitful, not only for you and our community, but also for New World. So tell us just a little bit more about like your training and, how you got to be where you are now.
Well, I'm a graphic designer by training. I trained in, I was fortunate to go to art school in Italy, in Florence, Italy, to start. And it was a very traditional kind of Bauhaus type school where we built everything from scratch. Everything was by hand. Everything was, so creativity was very kind of deep, at a very deep level. I then went to the United States after that, and took a very traditional design American portfolio school where everything needed to be perfect. So I was lucky. I got the best of both worlds, I say, in that training, and all of them I draw from at this stage. And I think it's also important to continue your education. It doesn't stop there. You gotta move on. You gotta stay on top of what's new, what's not just what's trending, but what's really valuable. And it's been very valuable for me to take courses both in business and now in design thinking. It's really elevated the way I think about things and the solutions that I've been able to provide to my teams and my coworkers.
Totally. Actually, you're one of, when I think of learners, like you're one of my favorite learners, because you're always reading, you're always listening to podcasts, you're always gathering ideas and kind of mixing them up and putting them together in different ways. And I think that for me this morning, I just was, I don't know, my boyfriend was saying to me, like, you're always learning. I was listening to a podcast about something very esoteric, and he's like, you're learning all the time. And I'm like, but I think learning is really the seed of innovation. Learning is the seed of creativity. So it makes sense that I like somebody who's such a learner,
Yeah, I think it's like research. I mean, I think design is based on research. Like that's the core of research. Like you can't design if you don't know, and if you can't, and empathy too. You gotta step into roles and experience them, and that's what I'm doing more and more today is that you have to experience the customer viewpoints in order to be able to design for them or to fill the needs, so you can't do it just from, and it's hard now because you got to have that face-to-face or that conversation with that person that you're designing for, in order to really get to the core of their needs.
Right. And that is even more challenging now, since we really can't be face to face.
Exactly.
Right? So how are you navigating that?
Well, I'm working a lot with our teams. I think with the New World Symphony now, I think it's really important for us to really stay focused on the customers. We know a lot of them, and we know a lot of people that have deep insights into them. So we are drawing a lot from those that have face-to-face conversations and asking ourselves, we want to do this, but what do you think? What do you think this person is going to do? And that's the best we can do at this point. You got to prove concepts. After that, you got to go out, prove concepts, and go back to people and say, is this really working?
Right. And that's something that I think it just reminds me more of entrepreneurship than it reminds me of arts and culture, because when you are an entrepreneur, you do a little bit of research, you talk to your audience, and then you give them like your minimum viable product, you test it out, and then you go back to the drawing board and you refine it. But when I think about like the traditional approach to the arts and culture in terms of the audience perspective, it's like, we have what you want, we're here for you, and here you are, enjoy it, and donate, and come back and subscribe and everything. So really getting into the psyche of the audience is kind of a new concept for a lot of arts and culture organizations, and for just artists in general. And obviously New World Symphony is an orchestral academy. There are young musicians who are learning there about not only how to be, top artists in the musical field, but also to be leaders in their community, and to be musicians of the future who are doing community projects and learning how to be entrepreneurial. So you've also done quite a bit on audience design. So tell us a little bit more about more of your experiments. I know you were working with Zach. I know that you were doing some like concerts where you were assessing things in different ways. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I've been working on this, since we worked together, and for ages, even before that, for years, and it's always been my thing that wanted to see how I can really apply design for the performing arts in general. It's such a great opportunity because we're in such close proximity, contact with our audience all the time. And but it's not really prevalent in the organizations, this type of work. So what we've been working on now, and we're very close to being finished with a product that people can actually start using, and which we are going to make available to anyone in the arts to use and help them and guide them in the use of this toolbox, let's say. And we're calling that audience experience design. It's design thinking customized for the performing arts, and it's just to give the performing arts a tool set and framework to connect with audiences. So
yeah. So one of the things that comes up as and you have a lot of heart emojis here on Instagram.
Great.
From some of our performing artists and educators and arts managers who are tuning in here. So totally feel you on that. But what you're saying is making me think about the role of empathy, and how kind of the next level of an experience for an audience is really feeling like they're understood. I mean, experiencing performing arts, especially any art form, I guess, is very personal. So when you are looking at experience design for something that's a performance, the first challenge, of course, is that everyone is going to take something very personally different away from the experience. But I really love what you're saying, because it makes me think about approaching how artists and cultural institutions can approach their audiences with a sense of empathy for their human experience, and that the audiences are also contributing something, which is something that, again, like when you're in music school, when you're in art school, when you're in design school, you may not always be thinking about the end result. I mean, maybe in design school you are, because that's the point of a designer. But We think of like one-way communication. So design is kind of like already starting with the end result. And I think that's a really interesting concept. So what have been your takeaways from this new approach?
Well, I like this quote from a design master called John Maeda. He was a head of RISD School of Design in Rhode Island, and he's a technology master and all that. And he said that artists to create questions, design is to create solutions. And they need to live together. They're not there to fight each other, because art is always provokes questions and discovery and more research or more, you want to look more into something. It's supposed to take difficult issues and project them so audiences can suggest, take something from it, and everybody takes something different. Design is just helping them along the way and solving problems along the way so you can digest the art better. I would say, if and I kind of made this up on the fly right now, but it touches different things. It's not always about what happens on the stage. That's art is the self-expressive thing too. Artists create because they feel they need to create and they have things to say, and design is not going to replace that. It's going to focus more on the audience and try to elevate their experience as they experience it at every stage of the way. So it could be just creating great customer experience as you arrive to a venue. It could be designing something unexpected to supplement that experience in the art form. So it just, the creativity there can run wild. You could imagine all kinds of things, but you do it through customer feedback. You have to find where the problems are, where the kinks are, where the moments are that are either dead or not great, so you can elevate that experience.
That's so great. And it's so helpful, because I feel like a lot of times, again, we're looking at the performance as the thing, and we're kind of glossing over what it took on the highway, what it took to park, what it took to, were the bathrooms busy or there weren't enough, or, could you get your drink at the bar? There are like all these steps in the customer journey that happen even before you sit in the seat and the lights go down and the performance begins. So I think looking at the dead spots, this is like a really good place for anyone who wants to make whatever they're producing on the arts and culture side better. Look at where your audience gets stuck. What are the complaints you hear? Because that's going to also like give you that focal point of like areas to design for, to design around. Like having an ambassador there ready to welcome new people or something could be a way to help the audiences have a great experience. Because when they have a great experience, they want to come back, they want to buy another ticket and donate and subscribe and all of those kinds of things. So tell us just a couple of I didn't mean to cut you off. Tell us a couple of maybe concrete examples of the suggestions you've made or the experiments you've done, just so people can imagine something like concrete.
Well, there's a lot of different things that we are working on right now. For example, we are now designing, co-designing a completely new social distancing experience for the symphony. Like, how do we, now that we know how many people we might possibly be able to have inside the hall, and this is all on the very early stages, so I hope I'm not revealing something that I shouldn't be revealing, but we want to look at everything and all the possibilities and at least prototype them to see what's possible and what's not possible. And we're using something called Service Blueprint, which is a design tool that helps us understand the customer journey. What are the problems and what are the steps in each of the customer journey as they enter? Because we know that the entry to get into the building is going to be complicated, and we need to check a lot of points. and also understand how who is interacting with the customer, on that line, and what are the backstage processes behind the person interacting with a customer. What are those steps? Like, do other people need to be involved in that? Is there things? And then once you get that baseline, now we can start designing, delight into it. Add some confetti here and there. We can add a stat. Like, there's so many things you can do, but you got to get that journey map down. So the journey maps are something that we've been doing. I've also been working a lot with the fellows on their Blue projects, as you did, and we've done it in different ways. So we're always experimenting with it. We did and that's on a slightly different level, because we're using that as to innovate. So we're coming up with something completely new, which design can also do that. It can make processes better, and it can also spark completely new formats. So we just finished a project called Beer and Brass, which we thought was very successful. It had an element of like home delivery of beer and then music and beer pairing. That idea came out of a 3-hour workshop, on design thinking workshop that we ran with the fellows, which was rooted in the fellows creating a personal, like a persona profile or an audience, and then building something on top of that. So taking that audience and building something on top of that as a performance, so they would fulfill those needs. They had to be clear what that person was interested in, what they valued, and then build something on top of that, or come up with ideas. And so you can start there. That was not the full thing. There was so much work after that. It's easy to come up with ideas. It takes 5 minutes if you set it up correctly, but then you have all the other work left. All the prototyping, testing, all the building of the event. So
that's so terrific. You're also designing experiences for other parts of the organization, which is really, really cool. I think there are very few organizations that have an in-house creative director, designer, all these different things that all these amazing skill sets that you happen to have above and beyond, like graphic design. So tell me, or tell all of us really, about some of the other work that you've done on the organization in terms of experience, not just in the kind of like marketing and artistic planning, but what are the other areas of the organization you've helped with that design?
Well, I think now we're working a lot on, I think one of the things that design does well is it's a good way to get people together and co-create, and and just to record what you're talking about and having something physical, because design likes to get things in a physical form very quickly, and you want to have something materialize very quickly, and you want to have it be just rough. If it's just something on a sticky note, it's a huge value, even if it's just a word. So what we're doing now is that we've been running workshops, we've been collecting ideas, having conversations, recording those conversations, and then we've moved those over to like voting on ideas, and now we're in the process of taking these ideas and working them out, getting more details, like solidifying them, deciding on, do we need to prototype this? How is this prototype going to look like? What are the next steps? Who is going to work on it? So we're just moving all these ideas, and we collected so many. We did 28 workshops just on ideation with the staff. Everybody was involved. It was a really fun time. And we got a lot of good ideas and voices into the mix. And now we're just mixing it up again to move things forward as we can.
That's awesome. And what a powerful experience to have everybody involved in designing the unknown, right? But tell us a little bit more. When you say prototype, there are a lot of people who are not familiar with this work. So I think most people are familiar with sticky notes. I always have them handy, but what is a prototype? And you talked about getting physical. Can you kind of like help us make the connection there?
Yeah, so a prototype is really anything to put in a physical form. It could be like a sticky note, like this. It's basically the first draft of something. For us, sometimes it's a journey map, especially when you're working with audiences. It's just the audience journey map. Like, and for those that don't know what a journey map is, it's just a step-by-step process with moments for the audience. So the audience does this first, and then this second, and then this and this and this. So you just go on a timeline. And underneath that timeline, you can think about things in little segments, because what design does very well is to slows down time and it freezes in moments. And when you have that, you can use your brain power or collective brain power. If you have many people in the room and more perspectives than yours, look at an event and talk about what's happening there. And that's also another thing that design does well, and is it brings all these different lenses into the mix, so you can look at things in different ways and from different vantage points. And but that's only the first lens you do. Then you got to bring in the customer at some point and have them look at it, because you're ultimately designing for them. And if it doesn't work for them, then you got to go back and revise. Yeah,
and definitely in arts and culture, we're not thinking about what doesn't work for people, right? Because we're there to be, experts in some way. We're the ones creating the art, and it's not like a co-creation while it's happening on the art side, at least. Obviously, the energy and all of that is very much co-created. So what I'm hearing, and what I've experienced myself, is that when you're in a room with people and you're brainstorming, it gets all about ideas, and then it kind of gets into like egos and opinions and like who's right and like what's the group dynamic of who will win this argument or whatever. But the thing I love about design and having something physical is that way you can start to kind of divorce the ideas from the people, and their that claim on the ideas. Like, ideas are cheap, ideas belong to everybody, and the idea with design is then taking the best ideas and building on them and remixing them. But when you actually have something tangible, it can start to be seen to solve things rather than just be like an idea in your head that's like my idea, So
I think it's really challenging, because if you like in general, and this is design is never perfect. It's always it operates in this ambiguity, and it never is the same. And you have to be flexible to roll with it as it goes, and you have to just create it as it comes. You might start out with something, an idea, you're going to do the XYZ, and you're going to do something completely different because it felt better or worked better, so you have to change. But in general, you don't want to bring your ideas to a meeting, because you end up just pushing ideas, and usually the most powerful voice in the room is the one that's going to win. And the problem with ideas that you love is that you can't let them go and you can't change them.
Right.
I hate getting ideas that I love, because I know the problem with that idea. So I tried not to love it, and I tried to get it out quickly so somebody can knock some sense into it or give me another perspective. So I find it very uncomfortable when I have like an idea or like a lightning bolt that comes in. It's much more fruitful to start from zero with a question, and then evolve the ideas with a team, because then you build on top of each other, and then you have more people excited about where you're going, and you have more consent behind the idea, and the idea is now supported by much more than you, and you're not there to fight for the idea,
or claim it, right?
Or claim it, or and you got all the egos in, and it's just like design tries to eliminate the egos. You're designing for a purpose, and that purpose is the customer. It should always be the customer. It shouldn't be you. Once you get in the middle, then you have problems. And if you understand design, and you find yourself, and all of us do it, if you find yourselves starting to move in the way, you have to somehow get yourself out of it, because otherwise you're just going to be fighting with everybody.
That's so important. And this is a skill I wish that I had learned in music school. Like, when you're trying to rehearse chamber music with a small group of people who all have opinions, like you learn it by doing. There's never been great modeling, at least not in my own experience, as to like, how do you come to ideas together without that kind of attachment? And you're very Buddhist about this, which is like your attachment is the source of your suffering, right? So, so Rebecca from Vizcaya has a question, which is, what were some of those parameters for those 28 ideation sessions? That's a lot of sessions. So and it's all virtual. So how were you managing the tools to do that?
Okay, so we had 4 customer segments. We had subscribers, single ticket buyers, we had community engagement partners, we had donors, 5, and we had fellows. So those were the segments of people that we were designing for. We all asked questions, and I'm going to get the question wrong. And they all started with, how might we design a virtual experience for this customer so that they can feel safe? Something like that. It was pretty broad, but it was addressing the situation that we are in. The reason why I did 28 was that it's hard to do a workshop or brainstorming if you're more than 7 people in the room. You don't get all the voices, and you don't have your conversations will just go on and on and on and on. With the more people you have in the room, the more. So we figured that we would do at least 4 per segment, and we would break down the people. But then we brought everything together, and then we voted on everything, and it was a lot of ideas. So we got three pages of like line to line ideas that sometimes cross, sometimes not. Sometimes we had very strong themes, and now we're working these themes out and these ideas out, the ones that we thought were the best, working them out. But we're using, just for those, to answer that question in more detail, we're using a program called Mural. It's free to non-for-profit, so please look at it. It's mural.co. You can create an account, but it's a program where which allows you, it creates a whiteboard where you can design within. You can put sticky notes, you can write. So when you're working, we usually connect on Zoom, and then we get in and we, put it in a solid form on Mural, and we record everything we do. And there's a bunch of tools. There are brainstorming tools there. There are things that you can use there with description of how to use it. So
cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have you back on to demonstrate the software, because it sounds really helpful, and it's this kind of access to resources. And again, most people and not-for-profits don't have access to a designer like you. So maybe that would be something that would be another live that we could do as a way of serving our community here. Cool. So what are you learning by doing this work? I mean, you're always doing research, like you said, always learning. So what are some takeaways from this process that you've been undergoing?
I mean, I think what I'm learning, I think the most is how valuable the customer is. I keep getting, like, I think that's at the core. If you start there, you're going to have success. If you don't, you're always going to have to go back and kind of bring them back in, But if you start with customer empathy, you will have success. It's I think it's a triad. It's customer empathy, it's your business model, and it's the resources you have. And I think when those align, all 3 together, you have the perfect design process. If you are only relying on business, or only rely on technology or resources, then you miss and you leave the customer out, and you just fall short. You can create stuff, but you're taking a huge risk in what you're doing. So I think that's the most. And then as you do workshops, you always learn, I want to do this better, or I want to do this different, or this worked and that didn't work. And so it's always a learning process. I don't think you can do it for 20 years and you're always going to be learning something new.
That's so important, and I kind of have a model in my head. It's like a triangle, or maybe like 3 overlapping circles for a Venn
Circles.
diagram. Empathy, the business model, and resources. Because if you're not leveraging empathy and your resources, your business model kind of goes out the window, right? But if you're not bringing in the business model and you're just going with empathy, maybe you won't have the resources to do anything. So I think that's so smart and that's so pithy. Siggi, by the way, Rebecca says it'd be awesome if we demonstrate mural.
Okay.
So let's figure out a time.
Another one.
Awesome. So I'm also wondering, you are one of the master facilitators that I've experienced in my life, and there is something and you're totally chill and cool, which is different than some people who are like super in your face and like very like, like perform. You're so much like in the word facilitate, that means like not getting in the way, but like helping make connections. How do you approach facilitation? Because it's a skill, right? And like you said, the way that you're always thinking about how to do it differently, which means you're not done learning as a facilitator. But I'm always super impressed by the experience of being with you in that context.
Well, I'm a little caught off guard because I don't feel like I'm always in control. But thank you. I take that as a compliment. But I think you got to know what you're doing. I think if you are an expert in something, you should feel comfortable in doing what you're doing. There was a time in Miami when we were running service design workshops, and you were part of some of those. So we were doing these events. We're bringing in people, and I think we did 7 in Miami where we rented places. We got people in. We tried to use design to create service businesses and service design processes, and it was a great fun, and we did it with a global community. So we sometimes had 100 cities in the world designing with us at the same time, and that was huge. That was a huge learning experience. I was working with really great designers, also Ezekiel Williams, and I get a call out to him, a great facilitator, still in Miami, working for the Design Thinkers Group, which is a global global entity that teaches design thinking and works with companies on design thinking, facilitates a lot. And Vasula, a good friend of mine, the most experienced designer that I know in Miami, working with huge companies. So I learned from them, and just working with people, seeing what works, feeling comfortable in design, feeling good about ambiguity. It's always different. So, at a time, you just have to, there's no perfect session, and I think just making people feel like it's okay to be there, and that you're not afraid of making mistakes. There are no mistakes. You're all just learning as we go. Then everything goes well.
Right. I also love facilitating, and I love what you said about ambiguity, because it's kind of like a co-created performance, which is totally uncertain as to how it's actually going to work. And you can have a great plan, but there are moments of it that can feel like, okay, now what do we do? But I think it's that's where experience kicks in, and that sense of empathy. But ambiguity is also something art does really well, right? You're not supposed to know what art means. It's whatever it means to you. It's like maybe to just even wake up some things inside that are not obvious. So how do you actually stay inspired? Tell us a little bit more about your own creative practice as an individual. Like how do you ensure there's creativity in your day beyond work?
Yeah, I read a lot, so I think reading is a window into something different, and I read a lot about different things, not necessarily about design, but different things. I like to build stuff, so I do a lot of remodeling, a lot of building stuff. I'm always busy with that, and that's my thinking time. I like to work with my hands and do things like that. So, it's and then I follow my kind of design gurus. I listen to them, make sure that I'm always tapped into what they are thinking. and aligning myself with their thinking or researching what they're thinking. There's a lot of advanced thinking in design. Not so much, you got to look outside of Miami for real design thinking. But there are really great conferences and materials on YouTube and in other places where people are talking about design at a very high level.
And tell us something about what you're reading right now. What are you reading right now? What's on your book right now?
Yes, I'm reading actually a great book that I would recommend to everybody, especially in this time. It's called White Fragility. And what's her name?
Robin DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic book. It's very timely. I wish I had read it a long time ago. But it's really important for us, that look like me, especially like me. I'm in a multiple categories of what do you say? I take benefits from a lot of things, being male, being white, to understand that now, and to understand that properly is important. It helps you also with your empathy. And that's, all of that I take into my work as a designer. Understand where you stand and how you talk to people and how you come across with other people. And she's so great at it, talking about, how white people behave unknowingly most of the time, and how defensive they can be when race is brought up, and why we have such difficult times talking about race and ignoring where we stand as people, where we live in our neighborhoods, what privileges we get. So that's the book that I'm reading. I could go on and on with it.
I know, it's so good. Yeah, I was working on a project with a colleague, and it was all about wanting to end racism through a program that they were doing. And when confronted with looking at their own ways that they show up and the privileges they carry with them, it really was all over the map as to how comfortable, and that was very triggering to some people. And I think it's responsible, and it's the thing that we all have to do. We have to look at how are we approaching our own privilege, whatever that is. And we all have a degree of privilege, but I'm so excited by these kinds of conversations that are happening spontaneously, because I think it's the only way that we're really going to truly move forward with an empathetic, equal, or equitable society. So I'm excited to hear that you're reading that. It's a really good report.
Yeah, and I want to add something to it. I think my best analogy to it is it's like being an alcoholic, and it isn't until you are an alcoholic that you can do something about it. And I think that's a lot to do with white people, and they don't know and they don't believe that they are racist, but they live in a system that is
set up for that.
Racist. Yeah. So so how can you not be? I mean, it's impossible not to be. So when you admit that, then you can finally start, speaking up, making sure that, because you're in a place of power wherever you are.
That's right.
So make sure you use that power not just to benefit yourself and your others, but speak up for people that are underrepresented.
Yeah, or who aren't in the room, or who don't have access to the level of privilege that you do. And I think if we're all showing up differently, that will help. That will help.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Siggi, what a fun conversation we've had. Oh my goodness.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. And we always talk about big ideas. So I'm glad to hear. And we're always talking about what we're reading. So that's really inspiring. And I just love your brain. You're just such a fun thinker. And, the fact that you are always learning, I think, is a benefit not only to your work, but obviously to your employer and everyone that you work with. You are very entrepreneurial with your interest in creating experiences that help people. And so, we all
help people through the work that we do. But I think when you are not afraid to go ahead and like spearhead new projects and go into the ambiguity and the unknown on purpose, you know, and think about how you can make things better for other people, whether that's with your privilege or with your skills and expertise. I think it's always really inspiring. So I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing of yourself. And we'll find a way to come on and do a demo of Mural. Yep. I think that could really help a lot of groups. So any other final thoughts?
No, if I start, I will probably never stop. But I look forward to the mural session. So we definitely talk about that.
All right, sure. Sounds good. Okay. Cool. All right, I'm going to end our broadcast here.